Mayor Good was determined for it to be the last. Even though they knew that MOVE members were barricaded inside the basement of their house with 6 children, police tear gassed the home and flooded the basement with water. But that wasn't all. Police had planned on bombing the house well in advance, and during the siege, using a state police helicopter, Philadelphia police dropped a gym bag with 37 pounds of C4 explosive on the MOVE house and detonated it. The resulting explosion set off a fire that engulfed the home. Police fired upon people as they attempted to leave the house to keep them trapped inside as the building burned to the ground. The fire department turned off their hoses and allowed the MOVE house and the surrounding homes to burn down. In the end, the damage toll was tremendous. 62 homes destroyed, 6 adults killed, 5 children dead, 1 mayor black.
He was the mayor at the time. And whether he actually gave the order or not is kind of irrelevant. You're the leader of the city. You were in on it no matter how you want to look at it. And if you were not personally guilty, you certainly didn't name any people who were. So as far as I'm concerned, it's you. Okay, he's since become a preacher now. I guess he's trying to save his soul after what he participated in.
If Wilson Good is in need of absolution, he'll have plenty of company at the altar of repentance among his fellow first black mayors. Tom Bradley was the first black mayor of Los Angeles, home of America's most notoriously violent police department. A former police officer himself, Bradley had plenty of opportunity to fix the problem since he was elected to office 5 times, serving for 20 years. And under his administration, the LA Police Department gained such an infamous record for police brutality and violence, it was single-handedly responsible for spawning a new music genre: gangster rap. In 1978, Moon Landrieu was the last white mayor elected in New Orleans. That year, Dutch Morial became New Orleans' first black mayor. He would serve until 1986. 8 years later, Dutch Morial's son, Marc Morial, would be elected mayor. During the time the Morials were in office, New Orleans, which could have become the next black mecca after Washington, D.C. and Atlanta, instead became the murder capital of the United States. Which wasn't surprising since after Hurricane Katrina, it was revealed to the world it was the most desperately poor major city in the United States. 8 years after Marc Morial left office, followed by Ray Nagin, the people of New Orleans decided to end the era of black mayoral leadership and chose a career politician they felt they could trust: Mitch Landrieu, the son of the last white mayor of New Orleans, Moon Landrieu. The irony here isn't even vague. Same thing in Detroit. Just like in Atlanta, New Orleans, and Los Angeles, in 1974, Detroit celebrated the beginning of black mayoral leadership under Coleman Young. All the while, we failed to notice the deadly indicators of crime, unemployment, education, and poor housing, all the things exacerbated by poverty, never moved. In 1950, Detroit had a population of 1.84 million. Today, its population is around 700,000. And in the 34 years of black mayor leadership from Coleman Young to the now infamous Kwame Kilpatrick, our black politicians squandered every conceivable opportunity imaginable to resurrect Detroit. And by July 2013, their malfeasance ultimately drove the city into the largest municipal bankruptcy filing in American history. The city was placed under the control of a state-appointed emergency finance manager who has autocratic control of the city's day-to-day operations. After all of this, it wasn't surprising when in November 2013, following the lead of New Orleans, voters in Detroit opted to repeal the era of black mayors and elected their first white mayor in almost 4 decades. Across the country, the clock is literally turning backwards. What we've learned during our 60-year grand experiment with politics is we can elect all the black politicians we want. We can have a majority black population and even a majority black government, and nothing will change. Without money, your people have no power, and without power, your vote is meaningless. No sport in America of the last 100 years became a major international event until black men became a part of it. And this has always frustrated black people because we've always known that while most of the people playing pro sports are black, practically all of the people who own pro sports are white. Since their large paychecks are not controlled by the black community and don't benefit anyone but themselves, we don't even count professional athletes as progress.
Well, somebody asked me one time, said, Dr. Hassan, what would be the impact if people like, wouldn't it hurt black folk if Oprah and Tiger Woods lost their money? No, it wouldn't. It wouldn't damage blacks one iota. Black people in general could care less. You know why? They're not connected to the black community. If they got money, they got these billions of dollars, and none of it helped elevating the quality of life for their own people. Then if they lost it didn't make any difference to black folk. It didn't make any difference when they had it to black folk. It won't make any difference when they lose it.
LeBron James, his marketing, okay? He's a rich young man, but what he's making isn't even half of what the executives of the Miami Heat are making.
Why can't LeBron and the 19 best players just go start their own league? All they have to do is book venues to play in. Everyone pays to see the superstars. So you put 2 superstars on 10 teams and then you put a team together with, they're great players everywhere. But my point is, because for whatever reason, understanding that true wealth is created from owning assets is something that we as a people haven't really grasped very well.
Our athletes and entertainers don't have sizable amounts of wealth. They may own their home, but that's about it. They're not major traders in wealth. Oprah's not a major trader in wealth. Bob Johnson, LeBron, Jay-Z, these folks are not major traders in wealth. They have lots of money, but where's the assets?
But black people did own their own major league sports organization, and the story of the Negro Leagues is as compelling as it is all too familiar.
When we talk about the Negro Leagues, there are actually multiple Negro Leagues that were run by different groups of owners. And they were often rivals with each other. There was the Negro National League. Okay. There was the Negro American League. There was the Eastern Colored League. There was the East-West League. There was a Negro Southern League. And there were also what were considered Negro League minor leagues. And so you had a multiplicity of organizations, individuals that we talk about now as the Negro Leagues, but they were not at the time as centrally organized and structured as Major League Baseball was.
Philadelphia was a major hub for the Negro Leagues, and many of its founders originated from the same church.
Philadelphia had a very large and active black community. One of its centers was the Mother Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church, which is still an active community church to this day.
Mother Bethel African Episcopal Church is a tale about black empowerment of its own. Mother Bethel was founded by Richard Allen, a slave who bought his own freedom and was converted to Christianity. He had joined St. George's Methodist Episcopal Church, a white church that allowed a then tiny number of blacks to worship with the white members. Allen was asked to begin preaching for their 5 a.m. services, and soon the church had so many new black converts the building could no longer contain everyone. But St. George's white members refused to tolerate the now large number of blacks and constructed a balcony in the church where the black members were to sit in order to keep them segregated from the white congregants. After a physical altercation where white church trustees attempted to move the black congregants off the main floor where the white members were by force, Richard Allen and the black members of St. George's chose empowerment over integration and started their own church. The church is now an historic landmark that still holds services today. But more than that, It holds the distinction of being the oldest continually black-owned piece of real estate in the United States. And members of the church would take this spirit of empowerment with them to build the Negro Leagues in Philadelphia. Members like Octavius Cotto.
One of the important figures of early baseball, early Philadelphia baseball, early Philadelphia black baseball was a man named Octavius Cato. Octavius Cato was a political campaigner for civil rights in this country in the last part of the 19th century. And he was also one of the founders of the Philadelphia Pythians, which was one of the first organized black teams in Philadelphia. They played for the African American, for what was called then the Colored Championship in the 1880s. And he was eventually murdered on 9th and South Street in downtown Philadelphia during an effort to turn out the black vote in Philadelphia.
It wasn't marching, protesting, and politics that built the Negro Leagues. It was black business, legal and otherwise.
Ed Bolden was a local businessman. Ed Bolden had a team in the 1920s called the Hilldale Giants. Later on, they were called the Hilldale Daisies. They famously played in the 1925, the first colored, and that's what it was called then, the first colored World Series. One of the most well-known stories is Gus Greenlee, who was the owner of the Pittsburgh Crawfords. Pittsburgh Crawfords were one of the top teams in the 1930s in Major League Baseball. When they opened the 1933 season and the Negro National League, they had, starting on the mound was Satchel Paige, and their catcher was Josh Gibson, who were really the two of the top players in Major League Baseball at the time. I mean, Josh Gibson, they said, was rival Babe Ruth as a home run hitter, and Satchel Paige was one of the greatest pitchers of all time, Major League or Negro League. And that was Gus Greenlee. He was a major organized crime figure in Pittsburgh. Was involved in all aspects, numbers, racketeering, and he owned the team. And it was a great opportunity. Owning the Pittsburgh Crawfords was a really convenient and good way for him to launder money. In 1933, with really the rise of the Negro Leagues, the efforts of Rube Foster in Chicago, Gus Greenlee in Pittsburgh, Composey in Pittsburgh, and the Chicago American Giants in Chicago, the Homestead Grays who played in both Pittsburgh and DC. The Negro Leagues really came into their own as an organized and successful business for entertainment, for baseball, and for black enterprise.
Ownership is where all true wealth lies, and because of this, the Negro Leagues were not solely a black enterprise. Because it didn't have to abide by the segregationist white male rules of the National Association of Baseball, Negro baseball opened up historic opportunities for more people than Major League Baseball ever did.
To complicate it more, there was also white ownership in the Negro Leagues, and it also presented an opportunity for other minorities to engage in business. And there were Jewish owners who were active in the Negro Leagues because they were also excluded from Major League Baseball.
Effa Manley was a Jewish female. She and her black husband were owners of the Eagles team in Newark. She ultimately became the first and only woman inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame. Eddie Gottlieb was part of the South Philadelphia Hebrew Association basketball team. He became a co-owner of the Philadelphia Stars. And long before Major League Baseball, the Negro Leagues were the first to break the color barrier.
You know, the Negro Leagues integrated before they had their first white player, Eddie Kelp, for the Cleveland Buckeyes. He integrated the Negro Leagues in 1946, before the Major Leagues brought up a black player. Under segregation, parallel industries existed. Social clubs, businesses, and that extended to baseball. And so, it was only It's only in the past couple of years that Major League Baseball has its first African-American owner in Magic Johnson and the Dodgers. And as much as we celebrate Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier in 1947, it wasn't until the 60s that baseball had its first African-American coach. It wasn't until 1975 that baseball had its first African-American manager in Frank Robinson. And it wasn't until only a couple of years ago that we had the first owner in Magic Johnson. And so what existed under the Negro Leagues was you had a black enterprise and black teams that were run and owned by black owners.
The beginning of the end of the Negro Leagues can be traced back to a specific event on a specific day. October 23rd, 1945. That event had a name. Jackie Robinson.
It was terrible for the Negro Leagues. Integration was terrible for the Negro Leagues. What happened is that when Branch Rickey signed Jackie Robinson to Robinson's first contract, he had a clause put in there that said that Robinson had no other obligations to any other organization. That was important because Jackie Robinson had been playing for the Kansas City Monarchs and had a contract with the Kansas City Monarchs. And Major League Baseball is part of a large organization called the National Association. The National Association governs all of professional baseball. It still exists today. And that's what unifies Major League Baseball and minor league baseball and protects and basically governs the transaction of contracts, player contracts.
Because it costs time and money to develop players, one of the chief rules of the National Association is that no team can steal another team's players once that player is under contract, even if that player wants to leave. You have to compensate the team, usually by buying out his contract or trading for other players. But none of the Negro Leagues were part of the National Association, and as such, Major League Baseball argued they were not required to honor contracts players had signed with Negro League teams. Major League Baseball began poaching players from the Negro Leagues with little or no compensation to the teams they were taking them from.
After Branch Rickey signed Jackie Robinson in late 1945, in early 1946, he went ahead and he signed Roy Campanella, who was playing down in Baltimore. He signed Don Newcomb. So he started signing other great African-American ball players who were playing in the Negro Leagues. And once that happened, Larry Doby came to Cleveland in 1948. Satchel Paige came to Cleveland. And by the early 1950s, they were signing guys like Willie Mays. Willie Mays had played in Birmingham for the Black Barons. Hank Aaron had played in the Negro Leagues. And so there was all this amazing talent who were ready to sign to Major League Baseball. And what Major League Baseball did is basically signed all these players in the Negro Leagues without providing compensation. And the sense in the black press was that nobody wanted to really protest that in public for fear of obstructing the path of these players to Major League Baseball. And what happened was that a lot of Major League teams, the New York Giants were outstanding at this, is that they hired managers and scouts from the Negro Leagues who knew the players and had them scout out the talent. So that's how Willie Mays got to New York and the Giants, was that the Giants had hired scouts who had been in the Negro Leagues to point them towards the best players.
The odds against the Negro Leagues ever truly being a viable entity against an institutional behemoth like the National Association of Baseball were pretty steep. I asked if there was any conceivable scenario under which the Negro Leagues could have survived. The only possible solution would have been black unity.
I think what would have had to have happened is that there would have had to have been a unified front amongst the Negro League team owners and also amongst the players. Because I think it would have been a very difficult, I think in terms of public relations, period, had the Monarchs stepped in and said to Jackie Robinson, no, you can't leave us and go sign with the Dodgers. There would have been a huge backlash against the Monarchs because there's so much inertia and support for integration into Major League Baseball. And that was seen as so much the desired They would have had to been a unified front from the players, the owners, and the fan base.
The reason you integrated is because black people, post-traumatic slavery disorder, going back to the antebellum days, have always felt inferior to white people because they conditioned us to believe so. And we couldn't wait to prove to them and to ourselves how equal we were. And so when the opportunity to integrate came, our low racial self-esteem dictated that we vacated what we had and integrate what he had because we had always wanted his acceptance. Negro Leagues, they wanted to prove to the white folk that they were just as good, if not better, to ultimately prove it to themselves. But if I know I'm your equal, I don't have to prove it. If I know I'm your equal, I'm not going to integrate my institutions. I'm not going to shut down my schools, my hospitals, my oil business. I'm going to keep it because I know I'm your equal. But if I'm not sure, I might have to give it a shot just so I can know within myself that the white man is not superior to me, which means integration is just another word for insecurity.
The issue should have never been integration. And that's unforgivable for black leadership in this country to allow people to bamboozle them into debating the issue of social integration. And the best way to explain that to you, I had one fellow ask me down in Tallahassee, Florida, I was speaking at the Hilton Hotel. I came off, he said, Dr. Adams, this is a white fellow, nice guy though. He said, no, you're just confusing us down here. That's why. He said, we just don't understand. We don't understand. He says, on one hand, we had Martin Luther King promote integration. And we got Malcolm X over here talking about segregation. He said, that's confusing to us. Which end of the stick do y'all want? Do you want integration? Do you want segregation? I said, I don't want either end of the stick. That should never have been the issue. The issue should be aggregation. The aggregation means that I should be able to come together on a plane, whether you got integration over here and you got segregation, I should be able to come on that plane, on that stick, any place I want it, and aggregate. Aggregate means pull my people together, pool all of their resources, their money, their votes, and their power, and their bodies and population to do whatever's best in our group self-interest.
Black people have always been eyewitnesses to American prosperity, but we've never been able to fulfill our potential to replicate the abundance that we've built for others. And I discovered our personal struggle to claim our place as entrepreneurs is not a new one. It's dogged us since before we left the plantations. There were several black millionaires who emerged from Reconstruction, but none more celebrated than one daughter of slaves from Mississippi. Alela Bundles is a family historian and an author who's written multiple books on one of Black America's most legendary figures.
I'm Madam C.J. Walker's great-great-granddaughter. I grew up in the hair care business with both parents working in hair care. My mother's family was the Walker family. My father was president of Summit Laboratories, which was another black hair care company that was started in the 1950s that actually was more successful than the Walker Company when I was growing up, surprisingly. I am a journalist and an author, and I had a 30-year career as a network television news producer with NBC and then ABC. Madam C.J. Walker was born Sarah Breedlove on a plantation in Delta, Louisiana in 1867. It was the same plantation where her parents had been enslaved before the Civil War, and she was the first child in her family to be born into freedom. But by the time she was 7 years old, both of her parents had died.
The young Sarah Breedlove learned early in life about white privilege and black oppression and the perils of poverty.
Madam Walker, then Sarah Breedlove, was living in Vicksburg, Mississippi, across the Mississippi River from Delta, Louisiana, where she'd been born. Vicksburg had been a hotbed of Confederate activity. In fact, the siege of Vicksburg was one of the hardest battles that the Union Army fought. The plantation where she had been born had been the staging area for Grant and Sherman as they attempted to take Vicksburg. It was a very, very long, many months siege, many months of a battle. And so true, when the Civil War ended, there was a great deal of resentment about the African Americans who were living in the area. Fortunately for her, she had 3 brothers who had moved from the Mississippi, Louisiana Delta area to St. Louis in the late 1870s. They had a barbershop. That meant that they had a little bit more status than the average laborer. She moved up to St. Louis in the late 1880s with her brothers, and she was sort of moving around from their one little shack and shanty to another. She did what most black women who had to work were doing in cities at the time, and that was to become a washerwoman. This is a time when there's no electricity, there's no indoor plumbing for most people, and the hardest work was being a washerwoman. You can just imagine what you had to do to wash sheets and towels and bedspreads and to get the stains out of somebody's nasty collars. You know, this is the work that was left for black women, as Zora Neale Hurston says, the mules of the earth. As it turns out, their barbershop was very near St. Paul African Methodist Episcopal Church. And it was the women of St. Paul who took Sarah Breedlove McWilliams under their wing and began to give her a vision of herself as something other than an illiterate washerwoman.
Sarah Breedlove finally decided it was time to play by her own rules. She set out to take control of her life, starting with the one thing that had given everyone else power over her: money.
Madam Walker started her own company in the spring of 1906. She had been selling products for Annie Malone, the woman who founded Poro, who would later become her fierce competitor. When she left St. Louis and moved to Denver, she was selling Malone's products. But she also, on the side, was working as a cook for a pharmacist, a man named Schultz, who owned the largest pharmacy west of the Mississippi River. And he analyzed the products. He helped her figure out what she needed to add to the product. So then she began to sell a product under her own name that had been tweaked a bit from what Malone did. Now, Malone would forever maintain that Madam Walker stole her idea. This happens all the time. The truth is, Annie Malone was not the first person to make this formula. Somebody else has an idea of how to market it better, how to tweak the formula, how to make it a little bit better. That's what Sarah Breedlove did. It's a time-worn tradition.
It was a tradition that was about to get a new look, because at the beginning of the 20th century, Madam C.J. Walker was part of an avant-garde of ladies like Helena Rubinstein and Elizabeth Arden, who were going to take the women's cosmetics industry that up until this time was completely run by white men and reinvent it in a woman's image.
This is very much a part of this era of the early 1900s when there was no international, national cosmetics and hair care industry. Women, in addition to Madam Walker and Annie Malone, women like Elizabeth Arden and Helena Rubinstein were the people who started this industry. Men didn't care about this industry. It was something for women, cosmetics, who cares? At the time, only painted ladies and women on the stage and women on the street wore makeup. That was something for fast women. The conditions were such that there really wasn't anybody else who was doing this. People were mixing up things at home. There might be some mail order product, and there were some products that white companies were selling, advertising in black newspapers. But these were products that were really exploiting black women. You know, there would be a before and after advertisement, and the before advertisement would be somebody with splotchy skin, and these were all pen and ink drawings with splotchy skin and hair sticking up all over, and the after would be the white looking Gibson girl. Well, you couldn't go from this to that. Sarah Breedlove's before and after picture was a photograph of her where her hair had started to fall out, and it was sort of patchy hair. And then on either side, you'd see a front view and a side view with her hair down her back, very full and very bushy and very healthy. And so she was using her own image as a black woman to say to other women, I know your problem is that you're going bald because you have really bad scalp disease. I have a product that works.
Madam Walker's business model allowed her to utilize an international network of Walker representatives and started an economic revolution in black society.
Now, as time went on, she said there were women who could see the same vision that she had. who wanted to be her sales agents, who had get up and go, who were dynamos. And those women became really successful. One woman wrote to her and said, "You have made it possible for a colored woman to make more money in a day than she could in a month working in somebody's kitchen." That was a woman who wanted to change her life, who really saw her possibilities, who could see that she was going to educate her children, she was going to buy a house, she was going to contribute to charity in her community. That woman had a vision. There were others who didn't quite get the vision. Oh, they wanted the cars and they wanted the fur coats, but they didn't want to do the work. At one point, she decided she was going to set up franchises for shops. And her motto was, "I will find a woman in the town who looks like a go-getter, and I will pay for her shop. I will pay for the shampoo bowl, I'll pay for the tables, I'll pay for the paint. We'll do a little remodeling of whatever little storefront she wants, and I'll do that. And then she can buy the products from me at wholesale, but I'm not going to give her a salary, but she'll get a higher percentage of the sales than she would if she were just an agent. But I'm going to set her up. I'm going to set her up with a shop." Well, in one instance, one woman who she set up, she put put the Walker name on the storefront and gave her the branding of the Walker products and helped endorse her and introduced her to the community. And the woman wanted a salary. And Madam Walker said to her attorney, "Wait a minute, I'm giving her the opportunity to make more money if she hustles. But she wants a salary. That's a cap on that. That might be $8 a week. But if she sells $40 a week, that's all her money." But the woman couldn't see the vision. That's a mindset.
Black people have been cursed by an employee mindset. Madam Walker refused to capitulate to this mindset, and this refusal to settle for the crumbs in life forced her to divorce herself from many people she'd met, starting with the man who helped her begin her company and whose name was on the very products she sold, Mr. C.J. Walker himself.
There is a point where you start leaving the pack. And Sarah Breedlove was selling her products, and she could see the difference that she was making. She liked having a little bit of extra money. She liked the fact that she was able to pay tuition to send her daughter to Knoxville College. She could begin to see the possibilities that her hard work was paying off. And so she was starting to make $10 a week, which was a lot more than $1.50 a week. And she had married a Charles Joseph Walker, a man she had become friendly with in St. Louis. After she moved to Denver in 1905, he joined her a few months later. She married him, and she became Mrs. C.J. Walker first, and then Madam C.J. Walker. And he was helpful to her in her business. He knew how to do a little bit of mail order. He had worked selling ads for newspapers. He knew how to help make ads. And so together they were going to be a great team. And she said, "But when I began to make $10 a week, my husband thought that was enough. And due to his narrowness of vision, we parted ways." He didn't really have the vision and the dream that she had. It was like, this is enough. I can buy a newspaper, get a new suit, and we can have a nice dinner out, and that's fine. And she said, "But I saw that I had something that had so much more possibility."
As Madam Walker's fortune began to grow, she gained the right to true freedom of speech. She was able to align herself with icons like Marcus Garvey and Booker T. Washington, even when the United States government and the Woodrow administration were openly working against the interests of Black people.
So Madam Walker's spectrum of political relationships was spanning from Booker T. Washington to W.B. Du Bois to Ida B. Wells Barnett to Marcus Garvey. And Marcus Garvey was, a bit of an upstart at that point. Madam Walker saw what he was doing. Anybody who could get thousands and thousands of Black people to come to an event, to come to a convention, to line up on the sidewalks for a parade, she admired the ability to motivate people, the ability to inspire people. And Marcus Garvey, along with Monroe Trotter and a few others, was very interested in what was going on during World War I, what was going to happen to the African colonies. And she met with Marcus Garvey and a group of other people with an organization called the International League of Darker Peoples. And they really considered themselves monitoring what was going on during the peace talks at Versailles. So she hosted him.